Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about a distinct possibility of how the Russians may respond to the drone attacks. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and we're going to talk about possibilities as to how the Russians could respond to the recent drone attacks on the military bases and the terrorist attacks on the train track. So, for a brief review, I've said this: the most controversial part of the attacks were the attacks on the strategic bases and strategic bombers, in that these are part of Russia's nuclear triad. Of course, that's the biggest discussion. Is this a nuclear provocation? Is this a nuclear escalation? And, you can look at it a couple of different ways. Number one, you can say that, yes, they were used to launch particularly the big KH-101 missiles against Ukraine. So in a conflict such as this, they could be considered legitimate military targets. That's one way to evaluate it. Another way to evaluate it would be this, that I would make this argument. Since this is, in fact, a proxy war, as has been admitted by, well, everybody knows it, the West, many people in the West have admitted it, that means this is effectively an attack by NATO on Russian strategic resources. So, yes, it is a nuclear provocation. So, yes, it is. I think when it comes down to it, if I have to make my decision of how I evaluate it, I do, in fact, evaluate it as a nuclear provocation, in that I don't recognize Ukraine as a independent and sovereign state that acts of its own agency. I recognize Ukraine as a proxy military tool that's used by NATO to make an attempt to take Russia out so that they can steal all of Russia's natural resources. That's my evaluation of the situation. You may agree or disagree, doesn't matter to me. This is my video, so I'm giving you the way. If you're watching it, then maybe you want to hear what I have to say. Now let's continue. Let me say this. I have long argued that the United States empire, the U.S. empire, and of course its vassals, allies, whatever you want to call them, partners in crime, that it is by its nature a very narcissistic empire. It is that which is the nature, the nature of imperialism. The nature of an empire is narcissism, right? You can't argue that it's not. You don't have 900 bases around the world and you're not an empire. It's absurd to say that the US isn't an empire. And of course, we're seeing one of the things that we're seeing now is what happens to empires, and that eventually it becomes so important to support and so expensive and important to support the empire, that the empire, the mechanism, the machinations which are used for world domination, for exterior domination away from the homeland, becomes so expensive in so many ways, in economic ways, in political ways, in diplomatic ways. It becomes so expensive to the empire that the interior of the empire crumbles. As I've said, if you think of an empire, think of an octopus. You've got the center of the octopus and all these tentacles that go out and grabs things and brings it back into the mouth. 900 bases are what? So we can steal bananas and coffee in South America and Africa. So we can take cobalt and all the things needed for cell phones from Africa. So we can go, wherever we need to do and steal natural resources, overthrow governments, install puppet regimes, all kinds of evil deeds all over the world. Our tentacles are doing that. After a while, it gets so expensive to maintain these tentacles that the center of the octopus withers away. And that's where we are now. That's the state of imperialism that we find ourselves. Now, let us continue. So the nature of an empire, if you think about it, if you think of that octopus as the center of the empire, the Washington, D.C., right? But not all the people, the ruling elite, right? They are the center. They are that mouth of the octopus that is constantly being fed. Well, By nature, it has to be narcissistic because all those tentacles are feeding me. I'm in the middle. I'm feeding myself. So what you have is narcissism. Here, it's all about me. I can do anything I want, and everybody has to do what I say. And if you ever study narcissism, what you'll find out is the dynamics of narcissism are identical to the dynamics of, I can say, the imperialism or the empire, but at least the United States currently, as it can't speak for all other empires, the one I'm sitting in, narcissism aligns perfectly. The tenets, the pillars of narcissism align perfectly with the mechanics and dynamics of the U.S. empire. That being said, here's my point, and this is where I get back to the conflict. And that is that if that is the case, and it is, then the way to deal with the U.S. empire would be the way to deal with a narcissist. However you deal with a narcissist, that's how you want to deal with the U.S. empire. Since the dynamics align, right? If the disease is the same, the cure is the same. Or if there's not a cure, there's some diseases, there ain't a cure. It's going to eventually take its toll and kill the host, but you can treat it, or you can deal with it. How are we going to deal with this? So we've got this gigantic narcissistic empire that's withering away and dying, that's flailing in all directions, that's angry, and it's a narcissist. And now there are times, let's say somebody is dating a narcissist, right? You're a man, you're dating a narcissist, you can just stop dating her. Now, sometimes, or you're dating a person who's a narcissist, your significant other, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, is a narcissist. You can often walk away. That's it. Things ain't working out. I can give you an example. I remember a woman telling me that she went out with a guy one time, and she was a good-looking woman too, real good-looking woman. And she went out with the guy. I used to work with her. She went out with this guy one time, and she came home like a couple days later, and the guy lived across the street. Calls her, hey, what's going on? She's like, nothing. He was like, I thought you got off at 4:30. She's like, yeah, I get off at 4:30. He's like, well, it's 7 and you're just getting home, and where you've been running around or what? You're right. Now see what's starting there. You see what's starting there? This guy's a narcissist. This guy is a controlling narcissist. He's been out with her one time and he's asked her what the hell time she got home, right? Unacceptable. Trust me when I tell you this, that ain't going to get better. He's opening the door for total control of her life. And she said, yep. She says, I said, what'd you say to him? She said, this ain't gonna work. She says, and he called and apologized and sent roses. And she said, thanks. But, we went out one time. Sometimes you find out it's going to work. Sometimes you find out it's not going to work. Right. And in fact, at that time, I was a cop. Right. And she's asked me and a couple other guys. She says, hey, can you, stop by my house a couple times and hang out and what have you? And we said, yeah. And me and a couple of the other officers, because she worked with us, we stopped by whatever, my car wasn't marked, but a couple of them were marked police cars. And we started stopping by there. We'd run by, and she said, just stop by and, park in the driveway for a while and say hi, or stop by. And if during the day, if you want to stop by and, have a cup of coffee and sit in the driveway or whatever. Right. So he sees police cars. They're regular. He knew she worked for law enforcement. That was something that we could do to help her, because she was concerned that this guy was nuts. So we, me and the boys in the area, we helped her out. For several weeks, we'd stop by, whatever, say hi, do whatever, pull in a driveway, pull over, flip the lights on a couple times. Whoop, whoop, whoop. That's kind of fun when you're a cop. You got a cop car. So, but we did that, let's keep this guy. But here's my point. She understood how to deal with a narcissist. Stop it quick. Here's my point. If you've got a narcissist in your life, and this is, I'm doing all of this to get to the Russians' response, or lack thereof. If you've ever dealt with a narcissist, what do they do? What is one of the things a narcissist will do? They will drag you into an argument. They will aggravate you until the point where you blow up, and then they'll say, aha, you're unreasonable. Right? They aggravate you. They bug you to death. They keep going. They do crazy talk. They'll say one thing one day, and the next minute they'll say something the actual opposite. They'll try to make the rules where they can say or do anything they want. But if you say or do the same thing, you're wrong. They will contradict themselves over and over. They'll lie, cheat, and steal. They'll say, no, I didn't say that. They'll say something and say, I didn't say it 2 seconds later. Right? There are no rules for the narcissist. In a argument discussion with the narcissist, there are no rules. And you'll think you're having a regular, well, what do you think about this? I don't know. What do you think about that? And then they'll turn on you. Hey, how dare you say that? You're attacking me, right? You can't win with a narcissist. And then they drag you into an argument. And then when you get pissed off, what does the narcissist do? Well, you're just unreasonable. Now, all of a sudden they're calm. Well, I don't understand you. You're so unreasonable. You need to apologize to me. How dare you treat me like that? They drag you into the argument. Then they make you out to be the bad guy. And they tell everybody, yeah, that old Garland, he screamed and yelled and went berserk the other day. He's a madman. I tell you, that's the game. Drag you into over-responding and then use your over-response against you. If you ever study narcissism, if you study those kinds of interactions, which I've read books on them, you know, me, I read damn books. I've been reading books for the last, God knows, 90 years. And I've read a lot. I've really enjoyed a lot of books on the brain, a lot of books on the brain, a lot of books on psychology. And narcissism is an interesting subject to read because it helps you to understand the empire. It helps you to understand colonialism, things of that nature. Countries that think they can do anything they want to with others and they have a right and they're entitled. Narcissism. They're entitled to anything they want, and you have to bend to their beck and call and win. Anyway, so let's continue. We're getting somewhere here. This is kind of fun. Maybe not for you, but it is for me, right? Anyway, it is. It's just like an intellectual exercise. When you study Zen, intellectual exercises are fun, such as this are fun. All right, let's continue. So here's my point. How do you defeat the person who drags you into an argument and then uses that against you? By not getting dragged into an argument. What do? Scott Ritter talks about this, the OODA loop, right? What does he talk about? I want to get inside your decision-making process. Once I get inside your decision-making process, I got the upper hand. I want to figure out your decision-making process, and I want to get in and disrupt your decision-making process. And then you're not making decisions based on what's best for you or the things you want. I'm in it now. At least I may not be able to control your decisions. Maybe I can. I may be able to influence your decisions. I may be able to disrupt your decisions if I can get inside your decision-making process, your decision-making loop, as Scott Ritter calls it, the OODA loop, right? Okay, here's my point. Here's my point. So, if somebody punches you, they want to see a bruise. And I mean that metaphorically, right? And physically, of course. Somebody hits somebody, they want a black eye or a bloody nose, or they want at least the person to say ouch, right? Okay, how do you know it's working? If you attack me and I get you in a wrist lock and turn that, how do I know that wrist lock is working? Ah, right. You scream out in pain, right? It's what people call the compliance techniques, right? They get that wrist, they get those hands and they say like a motorcycle, red. You turn that wrist, down they go. And it's a compliance technique. Now, there are people who make the argument that there are no compliance techniques, that instead, you get the wrist and you say, okay, you now do what I tell you to say. And if they don't, you rev the old engine up higher. Okay, right? There are those who argue there are no compliance techniques, that if you get that wrist in that position, you snap that wrist. That is a weapon that could be used against you. Rather than get the person to comply, you go ahead and break. If you can break their damn wrist, you break their wrist immediately. That way you take them out of the fight. At least you take that one fist out of the fight. And their pain is so bad. If they're not trained to fight through pain, they want to stop fighting. So one way to argue it is make them comply. The other is break the damn wrist. The second you get an opportunity to break any bone or injure anything, you do it, because that stops the fight sooner. And every fight, if somebody attacks you, you're fighting for your life, right? You don't fight unless you're fighting for your life or the lives of your loved ones. So anyway, let me continue. So I can get myself, how I am, I'm ADD. It's easy to get sidetracked. So let's continue. So if a person punches me, wham, and I go, ow, they know they've been effective. If they yell at you, you're an idiot, and you go, you're an idiot, they've been effective. They have elicited a response. The term elicit a response, right? If I have elicited a response from you, what it implies is that I'm in control, isn't it? It implies that I have created a dynamic in which you have responded. So to some extent, think about this. That brings in the discussion of free will. Are we acting of our own free will? Are we doing that? And when are we acting of our own free will? And do we even have free will from a philosophical perspective? But if I push you and you push me back, that damn sure ain't free will. I don't know 100% sure if I even know what free will is, but I know that if I yell at you and you yell back, if I push and you push back, if I punch and you punch back, that ain't free will. I made the decision to start that conflict. Now I can decide I punch back, or what happens? What do we see in sports, right? Two soccer players are playing and one of them's dirty and he gets up under the other one and he does something to trip or something to the guy, but it's kind of slick. So it doesn't really look like it would be a foul, right? And he pisses the guy off and the guy comes back and pushes him. Boom, yellow card, red card, whatever, right? And the second guy gets in trouble. You see that in sports all the time. The first guy does something slick, elbows and palms, whatever, you know, says something to him, your mother wears combat boots, whatever, right? Something that the refs can't hear or see. The second guy pushes back. The second guy gets in trouble. It's not fair. He said my mother wears combat boots. The ref's like, hey, I didn't hear that, dude. I can only throw this yellow flag on what I saw, right? The guy has gotten inside of the other person's decision-making process. He has forced a decision on that person. Now, let's get back to narcissism. How do you defeat a narcissist in a adversarial verbal situation? And if you're dealing with narcissists, every verbal interaction is an adversarial one. Always. You just don't know that they're adversarial, but they always are. Okay, how do you defeat that narcissist? This is how you defeat them. Interesting. They say something that they know will piss you off. Boink, I'm going to push Garland's buttons. Well, you know, Garland, you're only like that because your mother never told you this, right? For a narcissist, all you have to do is like tell them something when you were a kid and they're going to use it against you. They've got a weapon. Tell me about your childhood. It's a narcissist. Tell me about your childhood. This is you. Well, you know, my mother, I always wanted donuts and my mother would never let me eat a donut. She was opposed to donuts. She says it's a violation of her religion and it's whatever to eat donuts, right? And the narcissist is like, okay, oh, interesting. So, you know, I don't like to hear the word donuts because it freaks me out because my mother would never let me have this. So they now have something against you, right? What is the narcissist going to do? The first chance they get, well, you know, you're only like that because your mother wouldn't let you have donuts. They got a button to push. You gave them a button to push. The narcissist will ask you intricate details about yourself, but they'll never reveal any about themselves because they want something to push the button. And because they know they'll do it, they suspect you'll do it. So they'll never, ever, ever give you their inner feelings or anything for you to push their button, but they're going to push your button. Right. Because they want you to flip out so they can use that against you. Say, oh, you're only doing that for one reason. You're like, what are you talking about? You're doing that because your mother wouldn't let you have donuts. Now you're like, oh, I can't believe I told you that and I confided in you when you use that against me. They're a narcissist. They're going to do it every time. It is their nature. That's why they asked you the first time, so they could use that against you in the first place, so they could use that against you, right? So they're inside your OODA loop. Now you've taught them something even better. Anytime the conversation is going in a way they don't want it to go, all they got to do is bring up mom and the donuts and you're going to flip out. And then they're going to go, I can't believe. Then they'll become that. Well, I can't believe you acted like that. This is unacceptable. We're trying to act like adults and you're flipping out on me. Why? I've never been so insulted. We are not abused, right? All of a sudden, they're the sage. They're the brilliant person. I can't believe you did this. They're damaged. How dare you? You've hurt them so bad. You're a terrible person. They got inside your OODA loop. They got inside your decision process and they forced you to make a decision. I'm saying all this to get back to the Russians. Let's get there. In Zen, there's a million sayings. One of them is what happens when you throw a rock down a well and you don't hear a splash. It's dark down there. You throw it down and you're like this and you don't hear a splash. How deep is the well? You threw it down. You want to know how deep the well was, but you don't hear anything. You don't know. You're left in mystery. You took an action expecting an outcome that would allow you to learn something. If I throw it, how long before I hear a splash? Boom, 2, 3 seconds. Let's see, that rock was falling at roughly 32 feet per second. That means I'll say it's 96 feet. See what I mean? That's an option you can do. You can figure something out. You can try to guess how far down it is, things of that nature. Then you hear a splash that sounds like it's deep water, just tiny, like it sounds like it was very, very shallow and it immediately hit the bottom. There's things you can deduce from that splash. But what do you deduce when there's no splash? Nothing. You got nothing. So what happens if the West says, all right, we're really going to get the Russians? We need the Russians to do something. We need an excuse to make this thing broader. We need an excuse to say to our public, we need something to say to our public. We need to go to war with Russia. Our public don't want war with nobody. They're suffering, they're struggling, and we need an excuse. We got to goad Russia into going, here's what we have to do. We got to push their buttons, and then they can blow up, and then we can say, look at them, they're crazy people. So here's my point. To me, the Russians are taking the wisest move right now. What happens when the person says, your mother, you're only saying that because your mother wouldn't give you donuts, and you're like, and you reach over and you take your cup of coffee and I got a sip of coffee and you say, well, and you say, well, what? You're only saying that because your mother wouldn't give you donuts. Ha! And you go, and you take another sip of your coffee. Well, and you're like, oh, what? Whatever. I mean, you're welcome to your opinion. I mean, if that's why you feel I'm doing it, hey, it is what it is. No problem. Anything else? Because I got to go finish cutting the grass. They threw a rock down a well and they didn't hear a splash. They punched, they didn't hear a bruise, and all of those kinds of metaphors, right? So what happens? They do this. Okay, we're going to blow up some trains. And we'll hit these nuclear capable bombers, and boy, the Russians will be pissed then, and we'll get the Russians to do some big Oreshnik strike. Maybe they'll hit back Germany. Maybe they'll do this. Maybe they'll do that. I don't know what the hell. We'll get them to overreact, and then we can use that overreaction as an excuse. Number one, we can say to Trump, you can't possibly negotiate with these people. For God's sake, look what they did. They just used an Oreshnik against whatever. They did this or that, right? We have something to work with right now, right? And we got nothing to work with. The Russians are being so reasonable. The Russians now have taken this position. Yeah, we're ready to talk. Now, they know that the Ukrainians are not putting forth, or they're putting forth stuff that's getting significantly more assertive. And they know that the Ukrainians aren't going to do any of that stuff. And they know that the US and all the neocons are going to say no, but they've decided to be, they're this guy. Oh, yeah, well, we'll punch you. And the Russians are like, perhaps we need to talk. Oh, yeah, well, we'll blow things up. And the Russians are like, that means it's even more important for us to have this discussion. I think we need to work towards some kind of a diplomatic resolution, shall we say, an intellectual discussion of how we can resolve this in a way that for the future, it will have an enduring agreement where nobody will blah, 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 blah. This is the Russians. Interesting. Now, here's the adversary. Here, I'm throwing bombs at you. I'm attacking you. I'm killing stuff. And here's the Russians. Very interesting. We shall respond at a time and place of our choosing. Remember the Iranians? Maybe the Russians are learning from the Iranians. I still believe, could be wrong, this is an assertion on my part, when the Iranian president's helicopter went down, I don't believe it was weather. I believe it was an Israeli provocation. Let's face it, the Israelis learned something. How about all the provocations? Aha, we'll kill a nuclear scientist. Aha, we'll kill somebody on your blow this and that. Now, at some point, the Iranians did a, shall we say, highly moderated, extremely moderate attack, wherein they both demonstrated their ability to attack Israel, but they didn't attack them in a way that would cause casualties, great casualties. They just said, let me show you an example of what I'm able to do. Were I to really choose to do this, this is what I was able to do. Let's not forget, afterwards, the Israelis were like, well, the U.S. is not quite ready to go to war, but we got this. Let's set it up. And I'm sure the U.S., the neocons and everybody, they had their plan, right? If you recall this, one of the things that happened, and we can learn a lot from this, and I've used this to help determine whether or not I believe the U.S. and or Israel is going to strike Iran, attack Iran. So one of the things that happened was the Israelis then had, I forgot how many planes, 100 planes or something like that, right? They were going to attack Iran. We're going to fix you, Iran. And apparently, this is my understanding of what happened. Yours could be different. My understanding of what happened is that the Iranians had very good air defense system, and this is the number I was given, that the Israelis got within 70 kilometers of the Iranian border. They had been painted and lit up with all kinds of anti-aircraft radar, and they knew they crossed into Iranian airspace, a lot of their planes were going to get shot down. So they just released whatever missiles they had outside of Iranian airspace and turned tail and run, and Iranians shot pretty much almost all of those missiles down. A couple of them hit here and there, but not that much. And then, of course, the Israelis went back and claimed victory. We wiped out Iranians' air defense system. We destroyed them. They're naked now. They're completely unable to protect themselves. And so the Iranians were like, so then they were like, Iran's going to strike back. And Iran was like, yeah, nah, I mean, come on, what are we going to do? Hit back at a mosquito bite? I don't think so. They didn't respond. And what happened? To some extent, the Israelis, have they continued with their provocations? Probably on some level, but not on the level they were. Why? Because they didn't get the response they needed. They needed a response big enough. They were trying to elicit a response from Iran big enough that they could then say to the U.S., and I would argue not just the Israelis, that the neocons in Washington were saying we need to get a response big enough from Iran that we can then justify an attack on Iran. And it didn't work because the Iranians then said, True Promise 3, it's coming. I'm telling you, we're going to hit them. It's a coming when we choose, at a time and place of our choosing. We just don't choose right now. Have a nice day. Well, you're going to hit back, aren't you? Yeah, one of these days. We'll let you know, right? They were very effective in not buying into the narcissist. The narcissist, I'm going to drag you into the fight. Ha, ha, ha. And they said, nah, we'll just chill out here. I suspect so far, I'm evaluating based on what I'm seeing as I'm making this video. For all I know, the Russians, as I speak, could be throwing 100 Rushniks at Berlin. I don't know what the hell I know. But so far, as of the making of this video, my evaluation is that the Russians will do what they seem to have been doing lately, right? And you've seen it in the last couple of weeks, right? The the NATO will throw 400 or 500 drones at them. And then the Russians will a couple hundred drones and a bunch of big ballistic missiles, attack missiles, Kinjal, Sminjal, whatever the hell, I don't know, and blow a bunch of things up. And they'll say that was our retaliation. Now, we all know how the Russians work. They have a bank of targets that they're going to hit, and they're going to hit this bank of targets and that bank of targets and this bank of targets and that bank of targets. You know, it's all computerized and networked. So they just hit the next bank of targets and say that was our retaliation. Even if nothing had happened, they were going to hit those bank of targets. But why is that critical? What that means is this. That means that their adversaries have not gotten inside of their decision-making loop, their decision-making process. That means that they are doing nothing different. That means that this provocation will do this and they'll respond. That they haven't responded. They do something far better. They continue to do what they want and call it a response. I once said, I remember one time I was on the range training police recruits to shoot, and one of them at that time, I was a captain, and one of them walks up to me and says, Captain Nixon. So yeah, on your uniform, you've got this badge that says pistol expert. Yeah. How do I become a pistol expert? I said, it's easy. He said, what? I said, aim downrange, and anything you hit, call it the target. And he started laughing. And, you know, I was a jovial kind of person, always making jokes. And later on, I thought about that. And I said, you know, that's my motto for life. Aim downrange, and whatever I hit, call it the target. And if you think about it, it's a kind of Zen perspective. It is this. It is simply understanding that everything that happens, everything that we do is only determined by how we label it. Right? So what are the Russians going to do? We got a bank of 300 targets to hit. Okay. They're in the computer. The Ukrainians do something. What are you going to do? We're going to hit that next bank of 300 targets. Well, what are you going to do about that? We were just going to call it Target Bank Alpha, Target Bank 5 Alpha Bravo. Rename it. What? Rename it to Target Bank retaliation against the last Ukrainian provocation. And then go to call our PR, get Maria Zakharova, Peskov, Smeskov, Heskov, whoever the hell, and you tell all of them that when they go in, when they go on the when they do their next media briefing, you tell them that this next bank of targets that we had already planned on hitting today, yeah, that this is retaliation for the last provocation. That's it. You didn't do nothing different. You just renamed the next bank of targets. That's what they did. That's all they did. I suspect that's what they'll do, if anything. And this may be even better. I think they've come around. I think they've been studying Zen. I think they've been listening to me. Right? I think they've got a crystal shaped like a pyramid. Look at this, a crystal shaped like a pyramid. I think they've got one of those, and they're like putting it there in some chakra or something. They're going, right? That they are looking at this saying, what shall we do? Right? What shall we do? And then somebody looked at it and said, we have a provocation. What shall we do? And then someone looked at him, and the Zen master walked into the room, and they looked at the Zen master and they said, Zen master, the Ukrainians and their masters have created a provocation. What shall we do? And the Zen master looked at him and said, that's the answer. What shall we do? And he turned around and walked, and they all looked at each other, and then they understood that the answer was correct. What shall we do? That's all they needed to do, is to say, what shall we do? And go right back to what they were doing. That the question, kind of like a book called Ishmael, which is great. If you like The Alchemist, which is a great philosophical book, then you'll love Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. But the bottom line is the guerrilla philosopher, as it were, talked about a tiger who was pacing back and forth in a zoo, just looking around, because the gorilla was supposedly explaining to people how animals looked at the thing, how people saw the animals saw the world as opposed to humans. And the tiger was pacing back and forth in the cage, and the tiger was just looked at people, saying, why? And the guy asked the gorilla, why what? He said, just why? He's like, why am I in this cage? Why am I? Just why? Sometimes the question is good enough. To ask the question and walk out of the room. To propose the question. Is the question good enough? In the same way that sometimes, if you're ever around women, I grew up with 4 sisters. A man is a mechanically minded creature. And when a woman says, yeah, work was rough, and this person got on my nerves, and this happened, and oh man, this person was a jerk, and oh, my girlfriend, she betrayed me, and I thought we were going to do this and that, and she wore the same dress as me when she saw me with this dress, and oh, it was terrible, whatever, right? And a guy says, let me tell you how you fix that. That ain't what she wants. That ain't what she don't want you to fix that. She don't need a mechanical repair. She just needs to get it out. Shut the hell up. Oh, interesting. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then the guy should say something like, perhaps I could take you out to dinner. He doesn't say, I'll take you out to dinner because you're frustrated over these people being jerks. No, that would screw everything up, because that would be repairing something, fixing something, mechanically minded. He just says, when she's done, hey, what are you doing? She's like, nothing, I'm stressed out. I think a good idea would be your favorite Indian food restaurant. And she's like, I love Indian food. I didn't think about that. Great idea. Let's go get Indian food. And she's happy, and she loves this guy because he understands her, and he doesn't try to fix every problem she has, because she doesn't want him to fix every problem that she has. And sometimes that's the effect of a question. Why? What shall we do? How shall we respond to this provocation? And Medvedev comes out, and here's the key. Medvedev comes out, and does Medvedev, the guy who is the as has been said, the alternate ego. Here's the key. He's the alternate ego. He's the bad guy, right? He's the bad cop, where Putin says, we're mellowing out. And Medvedev says, we're going to pound them into the ground. We're going to grind them to pieces. We're going to tear them to shreds with our friggin' bare hands, right? That's his job. You see what Medvedev says? They're like, Medvedev, you look at his, follow him on Telegram so you can see what he says. And what does Medvedev say? See if I can find it. Quite interesting, my dear and fluffy friends. Quite interesting and quite telling. Quite telling. Dmitry Medvedev Listen to this. Listen to Medvedev. This is one of the things that helped me to understand that perhaps somebody in the Kremlin has been studying Zen, perhaps hanging around all the Asian friends, their Asian friends, now hanging around the Chinese. Nah. Medvedev, listen to this. Just tell me what this sounds like. To everyone who is worried and waiting for retribution, it's right to worry. That's what normal people do. Retribution is inevitable. See what I'm saying? Hey, I'm worried about retribution. He didn't say, don't worry about retribution. We won't. He said, you're worried about retribution? Good idea. You know what that sounds like in the Zen perspective? There's no such thing as bad feelings, only wrong actions. You can say, I hate that person. That's okay. It's okay to hate them. It's a normal feeling. There's something in there driving you to hate. I'm furious at that person. What would be wrong would be to hit him, to swing at him, to yell at him, to call him a name. Feel the emotion, experience the emotion of angry. Might be a significant other, might be a family member. Feel the emotion, accept the emotion of anger, experience it, and then it dies birthing, right? So what does he say? To everyone who is worried and waiting for retribution, it's right to worry. Man, he's a Zen master. That's what normal people do. Experience the emotion. That's good. Be cool. And then he says, retribution is inevitable. Okay. So at that point, he says, look, chill out. Retribution is inevitable. Inevitable doesn't mean it's going to come now. In fact, it kind of implies, chill out. Retribution will be here when it gets there. Right? Okay. He says, but keep in mind, our army is pushing forward and will continue to advance. Everything that needs to be blown up will be blown up, and those who must be eliminated will be. Boy, that's a Zen sounding statement there, right? Our army is pushing forward and will continue to advance. Flowering trees grow in the springtime, some short, some long. Our armies continue to advance. That's what it does. That's what our army does. That's all it does. Everything that needs to be blown up will be. And those who must be eliminated will be eliminated. The Istanbul talks are not for striking a compromise peace on someone else's delusional terms, but for ensuring our swift victory and the complete destruction of the neo-Nazi regime. That's what the Russian memorandum published yesterday is about. So what does he say? You're feeling a certain feeling, and I understand that. Feel that feeling. That's what normal people do. You're screaming for retribution. You're angry. You want to pay back. Don't worry about it. Feel that feeling. Be upset. Be angry. Be angry at us. Be angry at your adversaries. Be angry at everybody. Be angry at your family members if you want to, because they disagree with you. That's normal. Go through this emotional roller coaster that you're going to go through when these things happen. And it kind of implies that, look, it could happen again. But then what does he go to? We're doing what we do, bro. Don't worry about that. We got this covered. That victory is inevitable. That based on what's happening, based on what we've been doing, we're going to win this war. Victory is inevitable. And when he says the things that need to be blown up will be blown up, those who need to be eliminated must eventually will be. If I'm those Nazis, if I'm Zelensky, I think to myself, geez, maybe when it gets to the end, maybe they ain't planning on taking me out now, but maybe when everything falls apart, there could be a decapitation strike with my name on it. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I'm worried now, aren't I? I didn't get inside of their process. If I am now the Western adversaries who were behind this, who were planning on this provocation, why do they call it a provocation? The root word being provoke, right? I'm going to provoke you. Provoke, the term provocation implies a response. It's provocation. It is an attempt to force you to do something that you had not formerly planned to do. You're going to take an action that you hadn't planned to do, which means I'm in control, which means you're following my lead, which means you're doing what I tell you to do. And once I get you there one time, I got you. I got you. I get one provocation worse. See, here's the problem. If the narcissist is able to bait you, hey, you know what? You're only doing that because your mother wouldn't give you donuts. Yeah, you go bananas. You have gave them the keys to the city. Because from then on, Anytime there's a conversation and they feel that you're winning, because to the narcissist, every conversation, there's a winner and a loser. You're trying to resolve an issue in a conversation. That ain't what a narcissist is trying to do. You're trying to get to the truth. You're trying to get the issue resolved. They ain't trying to resolve it. They're trying to defeat you. They're trying to crush you like a flea. So once I learned one time that all I have to do is bring up your mother and donuts, and you flip out, whenever a conversation goes bad from now on, I'm bringing up the old donut. I'm taking the donut angle. It's an elbow smash. Bam. Donuts. Oh, yeah? What about your mom and the donuts? Ah! You go bananas. I got a button. All I got to do is push the eject button, and your brain will eject, and you'll turn into a mad, crazy person. So, in fact, if the Russians respond in a way that they wouldn't have normally respond, then that's all their adversaries have to do from now on. They have learned that all I have to do is provoke you and I can get a response. Because if the Russians keep doing what they're doing, then we damn sure know they're going to win, because that's how they defeated Napoleon. That's how they defeated the Nazis. That's how they defeat everybody that comes to their border the same way. And if they keep doing that, we're going to lose, because they always win that. That's how they always win. And if we get into an attrition war with the Russians, but a ground attrition war with the Russians, oh, that's a recipe for a loss every time. And that's what we got, which means the recipe is there for a loss, for sure. And any reasonable person is looking at that saying, yeah, boy, I think we know how this ends, right? So now they're like, well, fix them up. Now they're really screwed. Because they expected Medvedev to go bananas, ape shit. They expected Medvedev to be like, now we got to kill all of those bastards. Let the dogs loose on them. Let the hound release the hounds, right? Push the button. They expected that. And what do the Russians do? What are you doing? We're meditating. But we just provoked you. We're going to meditate for 30 minutes. Well, we gave you a huge, gigantic provocation. I guess we'll need to meditate for an hour then. And then we'll go back to what we were doing. If it's a small provocation, you ever heard the old Zen joke? Every person should meditate for 30 minutes a day unless they don't have time. And then they should meditate for an hour a day. There you go. We're going to meditate. Oh, yeah, well, we blew up some of your strategic bombers. Yeah, I guess we better meditate for an hour, and then also go for a walk and drink some ceremonial tea and light some incense, burn some sage, things like that, to make ourselves feel like we've adequately addressed it internally. See, here's the problem. Here's the issue. I want to make you do something that you don't want to do, but I want to make you externally act. But I do the provocation, and the Russians come together internally, and the president meets with Peskov and Zakharov. Well, first I'm sure he meets with the general staff. Well, what's going on? How's the war going? Pretty good. We're beating the hell out of these Ukrainians. We're advancing here. They're having some victories with drones here. We're bombing this. We're hitting this bank of targets. This is what we're doing there. Mr. Putin. Then he meets with Lavrov. What do you think? Well, I've talked to our allies and they're adequately pissed off, so that's a good thing. And they're angry at this nuclear provocation. Excellent. Go back and talk to them again. Keep up the good work. Zarakova, yeah. What do you want me to say? Peskov, Zarakova, I want you to say this. So they're meeting internally. They're discussing internally. And then Putin sits back. What's going on? Nothing. How are you going to react? To what? To that provocation. What provocation? I don't know what you're talking about. Look at like RT and TASS and Sputnik, right? You look at their Russian media outlets, and what do you see? They're talking about other stuff. Let me go to Sputnik. Let me go to one right now, just before we get out of here, so I can look. RT. Let me look at RT. Do I see how they're going to respond? Here's what it says. Trump says he spoke to Putin about Ukrainian attack. Illegitimate Kiev regime turning into a terrorist organization. Foreign-made explosive used in railway terrorist attacks. What are they doing? Moscow announces dates for next POW swap. I'm looking at RT. Listen to this. Ukraine strikes on Russians' airfields risk escalation, according to Trump envoy. You notice that the Russians ain't saying it. So they even come out and say, the Americans are saying, and then particularly Kellogg says that risk escalation. There was I would advise you to look at a New York Times article where they interviewed Kellogg about this. It's so obvious. He starts to say, this was not a good idea. And then if you read the rest of the article, he basically says, we support it 100%. It's great. This is what you got to do. And you got to show them you can strike back. So he starts off with, well, this probably wasn't a good idea. It was too much of an escalation. Then he goes on to support it for the rest. Yeah. And they took out, according to the Ukrainians, I love this. According to the Ukrainians, they knocked out 40% of the Russians' strategic bomber fleet, 41 according to the, and he continues, he doesn't say they did this. He says, according to the Ukrainians, this is what happened. The same Ukrainians that when the Russians would fire 50 missiles, the Ukrainians would shoot down 60, right? The Russians are losing 10 million soldiers a day and all that kind of stuff. So he basically says, yes, it risk escalation, but what he's really saying is we're praying and hoping for escalation because that was what the provocations are. That's what provocations are about. And so the Russians don't say anything. When I look at that, nothing, RT, right now, the only thing about escalation or retaliation comes from the Americans. I think that shows that they know what's up. And the Russians are sitting back saying, we're winning, we're going to keep winning, and your provocations aren't going to work. Yeah, your mama wouldn't let you have donuts. And that's why you're angry. Now I got you. Now you're going to blow up and you're like, sip my coffee. I've screwed people like that before too. I've so screwed people over, right? If you think about this, one last thing I'll say. Grammatically speaking, Zen, you got to study grammar because a lot of things are only rules of grammar. They're not rules of reality, right? So here's a rule of grammar. There's different kinds of sentences, right? There's interrogatory sentences, has a question mark behind it. There's declarative sentences, right? It may have a period. It might have a exclamation mark, right? Whatever, right? There's various kinds of sentences. But if it don't have a question mark behind it, you don't have to answer it. But people have a feeling oftentimes that they can make a statement to you without a question mark and they're eliciting that it's not an interrogatory statement. It's not a question, but it'll elicit a response. As an example, Garland, you're a jerk. The intent is to punch and to make me punch back, right? Garland, you're a jerk. Now, what am I supposed to say? You're a jerk too. Or something. Garland, you're a jerk. I'm supposed to say, no, I'm not. Or, hey, you can't say that to me. I'm supposed to say something, but that's a declarative sentence. It does not deserve, there's nothing, that's not a question. And from my perspective, and I'm honest, I believe in free speech. I believe in the First Amendment, and I believe in the First Amendment, particularly when you're talking to someone that you disagree with, right? So if I disagree with someone, I should say, I would fight to protect your right to say that I'm a jerk. You got every right. I mean, it's not like when somebody says you're wonderful. Okay, that's First Amendment, but that's not trying to me. Oh, great, thanks a lot. You're a jerk. Now the question is, how do I feel about that? I feel like you got a right to say I'm a jerk. You can call me anything you want to. Well, Garland, you're a fill in the blank. And I don't even respond I don't even go, that's a response. You've made a declarative sentence, and I will do that at times. Somebody says, you're a jerk. Take a sip of my tea. Well, what? I said you were a jerk. I heard you. Why didn't you say anything? Why do I need to say anything? Remember, there's no question mark behind that term, that sentence. It's not a question. It is a statement. It is a declaration. You have a right to make that declaration, and I don't have a responsibility to respond to declarations. If people walk around and say, it sure is sunny outside, I could say, yeah, it is. Or I could say nothing. Now, if it's a friend, I may feel like they're opening a conversation. It's sunny outside. Yeah, man. Like my one buddy's like, I texted him. They say, man, I've been waiting for this weather. It's in the 80s every day now. This is perfect and sunny and beautiful. And summer, he's like, yeah, I just went outside and I thought the same thing, right? So there are times when while a comment is not a question, it implies that you want an answer. And as long as it's friendly, as long as it's of a friendly nature, great. But if it is of an adversarial nature, you're a jerk, Garland. Yeah, I have no responsibility to respond to that. And you have every right to think I'm a jerk. Garland, you're a jerk. Not even facial expression. Don't even change your facial expression. Garland, you're a jerk. Well, what? What do you have to say? Nothing. I'm sitting here trying to drink my tea. Well, I think you're a jerk. You're not going to say anything about what? About me saying that you're a jerk? No. It's not a question. I don't have to answer you. I don't have to answer you if it is a question, but if it isn't a question, I especially don't have to answer to you. And to some extent, it is defeating you. You've thrown a rock down a well and you haven't gotten a splash. I have defeated you by not fighting. Bruce Lee talked about the art of fighting without fighting. You heard the Sun Tzu, you winning 10,000 battles without fighting any. That's a victory, right? So my point being, I end it like this. We're going to do a provocation against the Russians, and we're going to do drones and this and that and that. All right, ready, guys? Yeah, we did it. We got all done. Everybody, we've done a provocation. Let's sit back. Okay, what are the Russians going to do? They're going to respond, then we're going to counter respond. Everybody ready to counter respond? If they do this, we'll do that. If they do this, we'll do this. We got all of our plans. If they do that, we got all our PR to release. We'll say this. If they strike here, we'll do that. If they do, we got our plans. Let's go. Then we'll go to Trump and we'll say, you can't possibly go to Istanbul with these crazy people. And look what they've done. We got all of our plans. Let's go. All right, provocation executed. Now let's see what the Russians do. And the Russians are like, and they're like, okay, Russians, go ahead. What are you going to do? And the Russians are like, home. Oh my God, they said home. They said home. Yeah, well, that means that they're not going to do anything. That means that they're like meditating or something. I don't know. I don't understand it. You have been defeated, my friends. You have been defeated. It is my belief, maybe I'm wrong, that the Russians shall defeat this provocation by not responding to it. So the bottom line is, that's my Zen perspective. I'm out. Someone says no sound here. Other YouTube channels have sound. Yeah, people always say that. Yeah, you know what kills me? There's certain people who it's like their job is to say, hey, there's a problem, Garland, you have no sound. Either that or they're like computer screwed up. The guy says no sound here. Well, you need to check your connection, pal, because I think you got computer problem. Don't worry about that. Every show somebody comes on and says no sound. I think that's like a way of trolling people. Anyway, it's probably, the CIA person, they got to get paid too. So don't get mad at the guy that comes on every week and says no sound. That's his job. He probably goes here and he goes to Haiphong, he goes to Judge Knapp, he goes to all of these, and he goes in and every single time he says, I have no sound. What are we going to do? You have to fix something, Nixon. So we shall thank him. You know why? If you think about it, that's one more person. And we've got 569 people. We'd only have 568 without the no sound guy. Thanks a lot, no sound guy. Good work. At any rate, let us continue. I think that's that. I think that's all we need to do. I think we have adequately covered this situation. And look, it was fun. I really enjoy this. What's the point of studying Zen if you don't apply it to the real world, right? So it's great. So let me say a couple of things before I leave. To all 573 people, might I ask you, if you can afford it, buy me a coffee, Patreon, PayPal, Cash App, one of those ways, if you can afford to contribute to the station. If you can to the channel, it's certainly appreciated. Follow me. Substack is another way you can become a member. It's like $4 or $5. And oh, by the way, you can become a member of this show now. Just click on that little join button and you can become a member of the channel right here on YouTube. Also, I have follow me. What is it? Telegram, Substack, Rockfin, Rumble, stuff like that. And of course, guess what? My P.O. box is there. P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland, 21060. With scrolling across the bottom, it's the last thing. You can use that to mail a donation. You can mail a book. You can just mail a letter and say hi. You can mail anything you want to the P.O. Box. Some people don't want to do things online. So thank you very much. But most importantly, this is the most important thing. As part of the alternative media community, you're the most important part of this community, not me. I just run off my stinking yap. Who cares about that? What you are able to do is listen to some of these. And if this is one that you like, you might not like it, but if you like it, hopefully you do, Share it on all your social media platforms. That's important. Everybody who watches this, share it on X, share it on YouTube, Telegram, TikTok, you name it. If you're able to share it on all your social media platforms, please do that. If you're able to contribute, please do that. Whatever you can like, join, all those things. But most importantly, share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, everybody. Had a lot of fun. As always, I'm out.